I died with a plastic tube jammed down my throat, gasping for air that my own daughter had stolen from me. She looked me dead in the eyes when she ripped the oxygen out, her voice cold and calm. "People like you don't deserve to live," she whispered. And just like that, the world faded to black. But fate, cruel, twisted fate, decided I wasn't done yet. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer strapped to a hospital bed. I was in my childhood room in Millstone, Ohio. The air smelled like rust and dust and cheap detergent. My old alarm clock blinked 7:42 a.m. in bright red numbers, and I was 20 again, not 50, not dying, not betrayed and alone. 20, on the exact day I had thrown away my entire life. I could hear my younger self in the back of my mind, begging my father to go ask Lucas Brennan's family for my hand in marriage. Crying, screaming, refusing to eat, all for that man. Lucas, the man who treated me like a maid, who pocketed half his paycheck to secretly fund his ex, Joanna West. The man I slaved for, cooking for his blind mother, bathing his disabled father, raising his daughter from another woman like she was my own. The same daughter who would later kill me, 30 years of sacrifice. And all it took was a ghost from his past and a cheap bottle of pills for him to leave me rotting in that bed. But not this time. This time, I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to sell our family's last appliances to buy him a dowry and beg for scraps of affection. This time, I walked out the door with my head held high. I didn't knock on the Brennan's door. I didn't ask if Lucas still wanted me. I went straight to the next house on the block and pounded on the door like I had nothing left to lose, because I didn't. The man who answered had dark curls, work-worn hands, and the kindest eyes I'd ever known. "Ethan," I said, breathless. "When we were kids, you once said you wanted to marry me. Do you still mean it?" His mouth opened, then shut. His hands froze on the screwdriver in his hand. "Mary, are you serious?" "Dead serious." Because I remembered everything now. I remembered how Ethan Carter had carried my body to the morgue, how he wept over my grave, how he never married, how he waited, how he promised he'd find justice for me after my daughter killed me, how he died alone with my name still on his lips. This time, I wouldn't let him die alone. Lucas Brennan could keep his pride, his family, his precious Joanna. I was done groveling at the feet of men who only loved themselves. "I'm not joking, Ethan. Let's go register at the county clerk's office, right now." He blinked, stunned. "Right now?" "Yes." "You're sure?" I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And just like that, I took my first real step into the life I should have chosen the first time around. But I should have known, letting go of Lucas Brennan wasn't going to be that easy. Not for him. Not when a man like him suddenly realized the woman he thought would always kneel. Just stood up and walked away. The county clerk's office in Millstone wasn't much to look at. Flickering fluorescent lights, faded posters on the wall, and the faint scent of burnt coffee that had probably been sitting in the pot since 1983. But to me, that dull little government building felt like freedom. Ethan and I sat side by side, filling out the paperwork with shaky hands and tight smiles. I kept glancing at his hand, those strong fingers stained faintly with machine oil. They trembled slightly as he signed his name next to mine. I'd never seen a marriage certificate filled out so fast. "Do you want to use your maiden name or take mine?" he asked, his voice soft. I looked at him for a long moment. "My last name never meant anything until now," I said, "so I'll take yours." "Mary Carter," he murmured, like he was trying it on his tongue. "That sounds right." And it did. For the first time in years, maybe decades, my name sounded like it belonged to someone who mattered. But before we could hand in the forms, the glass door to the office slammed open with a sharp bang. Lucas Brennan stormed in. He looked thinner than I remembered, face pale under the harsh light. He was wearing that same threadbare blue flannel shirt he always wore when he was pretending to be humble. His eyes swept the room and landed on me. "Mary," he said, his voice loud and clipped, "what the hell are you doing?" I stood up calm but cold. "Getting married." "To who?" he snapped, then his eyes finally landed on Ethan. "Him." Ethan stood too, squaring his shoulders like he was back on the football field in high school. To me. Lucas barked out a laugh, humorless and sharp. "You're not serious. Mary, stop this nonsense. You want to make a scene, fine. But dragging some guy in here to fake a marriage certificate, you think that's going to change anything?" "I'm not faking anything," I said evenly. "I'm making things right. You just assumed I'd always be waiting." He took a step toward me, eyes wide, voice rising. "You cried. You begged your father to crawl on his knees for me. You practically handed me your family's savings just so I'd marry you. And now what? Suddenly you're too good for me." "No," I said. "I was never not good enough. I was just too blind to see it." He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could get another word in, the clerk behind the counter cleared his throat. "Sir, unless you're the groom or the witness, I'll have to ask you to wait outside." Lucas turned livid. "I am the groom." The clerk raised an eyebrow, then glanced down at our form. "I'm afraid not. The marriage is being registered between Mary Thompson and Ethan Carter. If you continue to interfere, I'll have to call security." Lucas blinked like he'd been slapped. He looked at me again, his mouth open, but no sound coming out. It was the first time I had ever seen Lucas Brennan at a loss for words. "You don't get to control me anymore," I said, my voice low and sure. "You threw me away, and now you're shocked someone else sees my worth." "I didn't throw you away," he hissed. I was figuring things out." "No," I said. "You were always sure of one thing, that I'd stay no matter how you treated me, and that's the part you got wrong." Ethan reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart swelled. Lucas's face contorted. "You think this is real?" He spat at Ethan. "You think she actually wants you? She's using you to get back at me?" Ethan didn't even flinch. "Even if she was," he said calmly, "I'd still take her hand. Because at least I'm not the man who wasted her best years." Lucas stood frozen, seething. "Let's finish this," I told the clerk, "before someone else starts reliving their bad decisions." The clerk chuckled under his breath and took our paperwork. Stamp, stamp, sign, just like that, I was no longer Mary Thompson. I was Mary Carter, not someone's maid, not someone's stepping stone, a wife, a partner, a woman who chose herself and a man who chose her back. And Lucas? He stood in that lobby, watching us walk out together, stunned and silent. For the first time in both our lives, he realized I was never coming back. The wedding certificate still felt warm in my hands when we stepped out of the clerk's office. The sun was sharp, and Ethan squeezed my hand like he still couldn't believe this was real. Neither could I, but peace never lasts long when your past refuses to stay buried. By the time we got home, my father, Carl, was pacing on the porch, face pale and tense. In his hands was an envelope. I knew that look. It was the same look he wore when debt collectors came knocking, when Mom's eyesight failed another notch, when I was too young to help but too old to ignore it. He looked up at me with tired eyes. "Mary," Lucas came by. The name was like a sour taste in my mouth. What did he want? Carl shoved the envelope into my hands. Inside were photos. Old ones, me sitting by a hospital bed, wiping a man's forehead, holding his hand, looking caring. Too caring, but they were taken from strange angles, and I knew exactly what Lucas was trying to do. He was spinning the story. He says, "You seduced him. While he was married," Dad said quietly, "that you were obsessed, that you tried to destroy his marriage, and now you're running off to marry someone else out of spite." I felt my stomach turn. "This is blackmail," I said. "He's trying to rewrite the past. He said if I didn't convince you to divorce Ethan and come back to him, he'd spread these photos everywhere. Church, the neighbors, even the local paper." I let out a bitter laugh. "He's insane. He's desperate," Dad muttered. "He wants money, he wants power, and he wants control over you again." Ethan stepped up, his voice calm but firm. "We're not letting this happen." Dad shook his head. "You don't understand. He's telling people you were the reason his wife left him, that you ruined his life." "I saved his life," I snapped. "He begged me to care for him when he was sick and his wife walked out. I even paid his damn hospital bill." I reached for my purse and pulled out the folded discharge papers I had kept out of paranoia. "Here's proof I signed him out, paid in full. My name's on it, not hers, not his, mine. Ethan took the papers and scanned them, jaw tightening. That's solid, he said, but we need more. And I had it, because I remembered every detail from the first life. In that hospital room, we weren't alone. There were 3 other patients in the same ward. I remembered them all. The woman with the broken hip who listened to country music too loud, the teenage boy recovering from a car accident, and the retired veteran who read Western novels and offered me cough drops. Witnesses, every one of them. That afternoon, Ethan and I drove to the hospital. The staff had changed, but the records hadn't. The patient logs, the roommate assignments, they were all still there. We spent hours tracking people down. By nightfall, we had 3 written statements. All 3 confirmed that I never stayed overnight, that Lucas was never alone with me, that I helped him out of pity, not romance. That night, I gave the whole folder to Dad and let him read everything. Slowly, carefully, his hands shook as he turned each page. When he finished, he looked at me with a strange mix of grief and pride. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not seeing the truth sooner. It's not your fault," I told him. "I buried the truth to protect everyone but myself." Dad stood and walked toward the door. "If Lucas shows up again," he said, "I'll be the one to answer it." But Lucas didn't show up. Because the next morning, he was suspended from his job. I'd sent the documents and the blackmail attempt to his supervisor at the Army Reserve Unit, along with a formal complaint, under my legal name, Mary Carter. When you've lived through betrayal once, you stop playing nice the second time. By week's end, Lucas Brennan had been dishonorably discharged and banned from reapplying for government employment. Word spread like wildfire. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't the one walking with shame down the street. He was. Lucas Brennan fell fast and loud. His suspension turned into full dismissal after an official inquiry. When it became clear he'd used military connections to harass a civilian, me, the Army cut him loose. No severance. No respect. No second chance. He didn't take it well. Less than a week later, I heard he'd gotten drunk, crashed his bicycle into a lamppost, and shattered his leg. That same leg had to be fitted with metal pins. The doctor said he might never walk properly again. Lucas Brennan, once the pride of the town, was now a broken man, literally. But my life was moving in the opposite direction. Ethan and I were thriving. We moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to help my father expand his small auto parts trading business. Within a few months, we were running logistics, organizing inventory, and making more money than I'd ever dreamed of back in Millstone. I was glowing with peace, with power, with pregnancy. Yes, I was pregnant. It was early still, but Ethan was already floating on air. "You're going to be the most amazing mom," he whispered against my belly, eyes shining. And I believed him. Until one afternoon, a knock came at our new house, and when I opened the door, the past came crawling back. Literally. Lucas's mother, Phyllis Brennan, was kneeling on my front porch. Behind her was a little girl, Anna, Lucas's adopted daughter, no more than 4 years old, with tired eyes and a tight grip on Phyllis's coat. "Mary," Phyllis cried, gripping my skirt, "please, please help us." I didn't say a word. Not at first. I just stood there, watching the woman who once called me trash now beg at my feet. Phyllis looked older, harsher. One of her eyes had gone glassy, probably due to diabetes, and she walked with a limp. "My son is ruined," she sobbed, "and it's your fault." There it always was. "You have to take us in," she demanded. "Lucas is in rehab, we have no income, no food. You were his wife." "I was never his wife," I cut in. And even if I had been, that ended the moment he used photos to blackmail my dying father. Phyllis's face twisted into something between rage and despair. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I know I am." Anna stepped forward, her voice shaky. "Miss Mary, can I call you Mom?" The question sliced deeper than I expected. This child had once watched me with innocent eyes while her adoptive father drained the life from me. "No," I whispered. "I'm sorry, baby, but you already have a mother." Phyllis's tone turned venomous. "You think you can walk away from this? You owe us. Lucas is like this because of you." I almost laughed. Lucas is like this because he drank too much, lied too often, and burned every bridge he ever crossed. And then, just like a switch Phyllis snapped, she leapt to her feet, screaming at the top of her lungs. She hit me, she attacked me. Help, she's trying to steal my granddaughter. Ethan came running, but I was already 2 steps ahead. Calmly, I reached into my purse and pressed play on the mini tape recorder I had brought, just in case. Her voice played back, clear as crystal. You have to take us in. Lucas is ruined, and it's your fault. You owe us. I turned to Ethan. Call the police. By the time the officers arrived, Phyllis had collapsed into another round of crocodile tears, and Anna was crying in confusion. I handed over the recording and gave a formal statement. Phyllis Brennan was arrested on charges of attempted extortion and disorderly conduct. Anna, too young to understand the storm around her, was taken in by her biological grandfather, Lucas's father, who, from what I knew, was barely functional but still present enough to keep her out of the system. The week after Phyllis Brennan was taken in for questioning, things settled for a while. Our business grew steadily, my pregnancy progressed smoothly, and for the first time in my life, I slept through the night without dreams of guilt or regret. Until one morning, he came back. Lucas Brennan showed up at our front door in a tattered jacket, limping heavily, his left leg wrapped in a brace. His face was gaunt, his once confident smirk replaced with something more pathetic. More desperate, he didn't knock. He dropped to his knees on our porch, right in front of our big bay window, and waited. It was Ethan who saw him first. "Mary," he called out from the hallway, "you might want to see this." I stepped to the window and nearly choked on the flood of emotions: rage, disgust, pity, disbelief. Lucas looked up, his eyes locked with mine. "Please," he mouthed. "I just want to talk." Ethan turned to me. "We can tell him to leave. You don't owe him a damn thing." I stared at Lucas, then shook my head. "No, I want to hear what lies he's rehearsed this time." I stepped outside alone. "Mary," he said, voice trembling, "I've been thinking about you every day. What I did, what I lost." "You didn't lose me," I said coldly. "You threw me away." He winced like the words physically struck him. "I was wrong, so wrong. You were the only one who ever stood by me. The only person who actually loved me. Joanna's gone, my mom's in jail, my leg's busted. My job is gone, I have no one." "That's what happens when you treat people like tools," I replied. "Eventually, they stop letting you hold them." Lucas crawled closer on one knee. "Let me make it right. Marry me, this time for real. I'll be good to you, I swear. I'll raise your baby as my own." I nearly laughed. "You're insane." "I'll change," he insisted. "Let me show you." "Lucas," I cut him off. "The only thing you're going to show me is how fast you can crawl back to wherever you came from." He flinched. "You're really not going to forgive me. You assaulted me. You tried to ruin my marriage. You blackmailed my father. And now you think a few tears will undo all of that." "I'll do anything," he said, suddenly frantic. Look. And before I could move, Lucas raised his hand and began slapping himself. Hard, loud, again and again, like he was trying to beat guilt into his own face. "I'm a monster, I know that," he screamed. "But I loved you, I still love you. I'll never stop." I froze, not out of compassion but fear, because this wasn't love, this was obsession, the kind that turns toxic, dangerous, and unhinged. "Leave," I said. "Now." "I won't," he snapped. "You're my last chance. If I can't have you, no one can." Before I could even call for Ethan, Lucas lunged. He shoved me against the porch railing, trying to grab my arms. My breath hitched in panic as he yelled, "If I can't have you." Then suddenly, bam! Ethan burst through the door and tackled him to the ground. The two men wrestled on the wooden porch. I backed away, shaking, heart thudding wildly. Lucas howled as Ethan pinned him down, blood trickling from his nose. "You touch her again," Ethan growled, "and I swear to God, I'll make you regret ever being born." The police arrived within 10 minutes. Lucas was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming my name like it was a curse and a prayer all at once. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was angry. Angry that I had let this man define so much of my life. Angry that I had ever let his voice drown out my own. But when I turned toward Ethan and saw his sleeping face, his hand gently resting over the curve of my stomach, I remembered what this new life was really about. Not revenge, not regret, redemption. And I wasn't going to waste another minute looking backward. 2 weeks after Lucas was arrested, I got the call. "He's been denied bail," the officer said. "You and your husband are cleared to attend the preliminary hearing if you'd like to submit your statement in person." I wasn't sure if I wanted to see him again, but Ethan stood beside me, holding my hand. "Let's finish this," he said gently, and so we did. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, tucked inside a gray county building just outside Atlanta. The walls smelled of stale air and floor wax. But when Lucas Brennan was wheeled in, his legs still in a brace, his arms cuffed, his face hollow and bruised, I didn't feel fear. I felt nothing. He looked around, searching for someone. And when his eyes landed on me, he smiled. That same manipulative smile he used to wear when sweet-talking his way into forgiveness. But this time, I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just stood and read my victim statement. "My name is Mary Carter. I am a wife, a daughter, a mother-to-be. I am not a doormat, a scapegoat, or a pawn in anyone's story, especially not Lucas Brennan's. He didn't break me. He gave me the reason to rise. And I ask this court to ensure that no one else ever has to suffer what I did under his hand." I stepped down, and for the first time, Lucas didn't smirk. He didn't speak. He just sat there, stunned. Later that week, Lucas was sentenced to 5 years for assault, harassment, and attempted coercion. When I heard the news, I didn't cheer. I just exhaled, like I had been holding my breath for 30 years and finally let it go. Our life moved forward faster than I expected. Dad's business boomed. With Ethan's help, we opened our first distribution warehouse and hired 12 full-time employees. I designed the brand, oversaw hiring, and finally stepped into the leadership role I'd never been allowed to have in my past life. I wasn't a background character anymore. I was the woman at the head of the table. And then came our son. Born on a rainy morning in April, 8 pounds of sheer wonder. We named him Caleb after Ethan's grandfather. Strong, steady, loyal. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I wept. Not for pain, not for fear, but for every version of me that never thought she'd live to feel this joy. Ethan kissed my forehead. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought us here." A month after Caleb's birth, I got one more visitor from the past. It was Phyllis Brennan, Lucas's mother, now out on probation and looking worse than ever. Her clothes hung loose, her hair was thinned and gray, but her voice still had that bite. "You happy now?" she hissed. "You ruined my son, you took everything." I held Caleb close and met her gaze with icy calm. "No, your son ruined himself. I just stopped saving him." She looked at me with a kind of twisted hatred. "Rot in hell," she muttered. I smiled. "I already did. I'm done with that place now." I shut the door in her face and never looked back. At the end of that summer, Ethan and I held a quiet party. Just family, friends, no drama, no pretending. Just grilled corn, laughter, a sleeping baby, and the smell of fresh Georgia air. Dad stood beside me, a beer in hand and tears in his eyes. "Your mom would be proud, Mary," he said. "You gave our name a new beginning." "I had to live through hell," I said, "to realize I was the only one who could rewrite my story." He nodded, "And you did, page by page." 3 years later, I stood in front of a room filled with women, some in suits, others in scrubs, a few holding sleeping toddlers on their hips, and told them the truth. "My name is Mary Carter," I said into the microphone. "I used to believe love meant sacrifice, that if I gave enough, bent far enough, stayed silent long enough, someone would finally see my worth." I paused, scanning the room. They were listening. But here's what no one told me growing up in a town like Millstone: love without respect isn't love, and surviving is not the same as living. Applause erupted. A few women wiped their eyes. I stepped off the stage and walked back toward my seat, where Ethan stood waiting, our son Caleb squirming happily in his arms. My father sat beside them, proudly holding a Mary's First Keynote program like it was a college diploma. This was the life I had rebuilt. From the ashes, from the lies, from the version of me that once thought she couldn't make it without Lucas Brennan. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Mary. I was released early for good behavior. Don't worry, I'm not coming back. I saw your photo in the newspaper. You looked happy, strong. I never knew how much I hurt you until I had to live with what I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry, Lucas. I sat for a moment, letting the paper rest in my lap. Not because I felt pity or regret, but because it was over. Truly, fully over. By fall, our business went public. The Carter Group became one of the fastest-growing logistics startups in the Southeast. At the ribbon cutting for our second warehouse, a reporter asked, "Mrs. Carter, what's the secret to your success?" I smiled, knowing exactly what I won't tolerate anymore. He laughed politely, not realizing how deep the words ran. That night, after Caleb fell asleep and my dad turned in early, Ethan and I sat on the porch watching the fireflies blink across the lawn. He looked over at me. "Do you ever think about the other life?" "The first one," I asked. "Yeah." I thought for a second. "Sometimes, but only to remind myself how far I've come." Ethan nodded. "You could have given up so many times." "But I didn't," I said. "Because someone once